Ethan's garage sat on the edge of town, its paint chipped, its sign hanging crookedly as if reflecting the weight pressing on its owner's shoulders. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and old metal, and the sound of clinking tools echoed against the concrete walls as Ethan wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag, staring at the clock that ticked louder with each passing minute of his overdue bills. He was a man in his early 30s, tall but worn down, his once hopeful eyes now dimmed by years of hardship and responsibility. Ever since his wife had left when their daughter Lily was only 3, Ethan had been both mother and father, and though he carried that role with quiet pride, the burden often felt unbearable, especially now that his small-town auto shop was on the brink of shutting down. That evening, as rain lashed against the corrugated roof and thunder rolled across the sky, Ethan was closing up when headlights cut through the storm and a sleek black car rolled into his lot, steam hissing angrily from beneath the hood. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this, a high-end luxury model worth more than his entire garage, and when the driver's door opened, out stepped a woman whose presence seemed to still the storm itself. She wore a long coat that clung to her frame, her hair damp from the rain, her heels clicking softly against the wet concrete as she approached him with a mix of urgency and composure. "Can you help me?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes betraying worry. Ethan, exhausted yet instinctively kind, nodded without hesitation and popped the hood, the hiss of steam greeting him like a sigh of despair. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite his fatigue, diagnosing the issue with the precision of a man who, despite his struggles, still took pride in his craft. The woman stood nearby, watching quietly, her sharp eyes studying not only his skill but the quiet determination in his movements. Hours passed, the storm raged, but Ethan didn't complain or ask questions. He simply worked until the engine purred back to life, the sleek machine breathing again under his care. When it was done, the woman reached into her bag and pulled out a card along with a thick stack of cash, more than he had earned in weeks, but Ethan shook his head firmly. "Just pay me what it's worth." "Nothing more," he said, wiping the sweat and grease from his brow, his voice steady though his heart pounded with the reminder of his unpaid debts. For a moment, she studied him, as if weighing something deeper than money, then she placed only a fair payment in his hand, leaving the rest untouched, and handed him her card with a faint smile. "You may need this one day," she whispered before slipping back into her car, the engine roaring to life as she disappeared into the rain, leaving Ethan standing in the glow of his flickering sign, clutching the card and wondering why a stranger's presence lingered in his thoughts long after the storm had passed. The days that followed blurred into a grind of exhaustion and quiet despair, as Ethan juggled fixing old pickup trucks for townsfolk who barely had the money to pay him and ignoring the ever-growing stack of bills that mocked him from his kitchen table each night, while Lily, with her innocent eyes and boundless energy, tried to cheer him with drawings of Daddy's garage and promises that things would get better. But no matter how hard he worked, the numbers never added up, and when the bank's letter arrived threatening foreclosure, Ethan felt a hollow ache in his chest that no amount of grease or determination could mask. One late afternoon, just as he was considering shutting the shop early, the familiar purr of a luxury engine rolled into his lot and Ethan's heart skipped when he saw the same sleek black car gleaming under the sun, cleaner now, as if it belonged to another world entirely. The woman stepped out, her coat replaced by a tailored dress, her hair tied neatly back, her presence commanding yet disarmingly warm as she walked toward him with a small, knowing smile. "You fixed it perfectly," she said, resting her hand lightly on the car's hood. "I couldn't stop thinking about how you worked that night, like the car was more than just metal, like it was something alive." Ethan brushed off the compliment, embarrassed, and muttered that he simply did his job, but she didn't let him retreat behind modesty. Instead, she asked questions, her curiosity weaving its way past his defenses. How long had he run the garage, what inspired him to become a mechanic, and most tenderly, about Lily, whose crayon drawings were proudly taped to the office wall behind him. Ethan answered cautiously, unused to someone taking genuine interest in his life, yet he found himself telling her more than he intended, about his late nights, his fears of losing the shop, and his desire to build something lasting for his daughter. The woman listened intently, her gaze softening with every word, and when Ethan finally grew quiet, she glanced around the dusty shop with a thoughtful expression. "This place has potential," she murmured, "but more than that, you have potential." He frowned, unsure what she meant, but before he could ask, she handed him her card again, this time with a handwritten number on the back. "Call me if you're ever ready to talk about possibilities," she said, her tone deliberate, as if she were offering more than just words. With that, she slipped back into her car and drove off, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air and a strange feeling stirring in Ethan's chest, a mix of hope and disbelief. That night, as Lily slept curled against her stuffed bear, Ethan sat at the kitchen table staring at the card under the dim yellow light, his calloused fingers tracing the inked digits, his mind racing with questions he couldn't silence. Who exactly was this woman, and why did she care about a broke mechanic like him? The answer came not from the woman herself but from a passing remark that jolted Ethan's world off its axis. One evening, while fueling up his old pickup at the gas station, he overheard two businessmen in pressed suits talking excitedly about an article in the newspaper, and when they mentioned the name, Isabella Hartwell, Ethan's heart froze, for it was the same name etched elegantly on the card tucked in his wallet. He bought the paper with trembling hands, flipping through until his eyes landed on her photograph. There she was, unmistakably the woman from the stormy night, but not just a stranded driver. She was identified as the CEO of Hartwell Motors, a billion-dollar automotive empire known for cutting-edge designs and international influence. The revelation left Ethan breathless, his mind spinning with disbelief. Why had someone of her stature walked into his crumbling garage? Why had she spoken to him as though he were more than just a struggling mechanic scraping by? The next time Isabella returned, pulling up in a different luxury car that gleamed like it had rolled straight from a showroom floor, Ethan confronted her, his words hesitant but firm. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes searching his with a vulnerability he hadn't expected. Then she admitted softly that she had grown weary of people who treated her like a walking fortune, weary of business associates who saw only her wealth and not her humanity, so she had been traveling incognito when fate led her to his garage. Ethan listened, conflicted, his pride warring with gratitude, and before he could respond, she stepped closer and said something that turned his skepticism into stunned silence. "Ethan, I wasn't just impressed with your work on my car, I was impressed with you. Your honesty, your integrity, your refusal to take more than what was fair. That is rare, and it's exactly the kind of foundation I want for something new I'm building." She explained that Hartwell Motors was launching a new initiative, a line of affordable, reliable vehicles designed for working families, and she wanted someone who understood what ordinary people needed, someone who worked with his hands and heart, not just with spreadsheets and boardroom jargon. Ethan's chest tightened as she laid out her proposal. She wanted to partner with him, to invest in his garage, modernize it, and bring him aboard as a consultant for the new project. The offer was staggering, almost impossible to grasp, yet laced with sincerity that made it hard to dismiss. Ethan stared at her, his mind a storm of doubt and yearning. Could he trust her? Could he step into a world so far removed from his small-town struggles, or would he lose himself in the shadow of her fortune? Isabella must have read the conflict in his eyes, for she added softly, "I'm not here to rescue you, Ethan. I'm here because I believe in you. The question is, do you?" And with that, she left him standing in his garage, his heart pounding harder than it had in years, staring at the gleaming business card in his palm like it was the key to a future he wasn't sure he deserved. The decision didn't come easily, for Ethan spent sleepless nights pacing the worn wooden floor of his kitchen, staring at Isabella's card under the dim light as if it might whisper the answer he was too afraid to admit, but each time he glanced at Lily's sleeping face, framed in curls as she clutched her stuffed bear, he knew he had to risk everything for her future. When he finally called Isabella, his voice cracked with nerves, but her response was calm, almost relieved, as if she had been waiting for him to take the leap. The weeks that followed brought a whirlwind of change. Contracts were signed, his garage underwent a transformation he could barely recognize, and soon the dusty floors and rusted shelves gave way to gleaming equipment, bright lights, and a team of workers he handpicked from the community, men and women who, like him, had been overlooked too many times. Isabella visited often, not as the distant CEO he had seen in the newspaper, but as a partner who asked his opinion, listened to his ideas, and even laughed with Lily, who had taken to calling her Miss Bella, as though she had always been part of their small family. Slowly, Ethan's pride shifted from fear to gratitude, and what began as business grew into something more personal, though unspoken, lingering in the way Isabella's eyes softened when she looked at him or how his heart quickened whenever her hand brushed his in passing. On the day of the grand reopening, the entire town gathered, curious and proud, their faces lit by the string lights draped across the freshly painted sign that now read Ethan's Auto, in partnership with Hartwell Motors. Standing before the crowd, Ethan's throat tightened as he tried to find the right words, his hands trembling as he spoke. "I thought my story was about survival," he said, his voice carrying through the evening air, "but it turns out it's about trust, and about the right people walking into your life when you least expect it." The applause that followed felt like a tide washing away years of struggle, and as the ribbon was cut and the garage doors lifted to reveal the shining future inside, Ethan's eyes found Isabella in the crowd, her smile warm and proud, her gaze holding his with a promise he hadn't dared to imagine. In that moment, he understood that the deal she had offered was never just about cars or business. It was about believing in second chances, in the possibility that even a broke mechanic could be seen, valued, and chosen for more than his struggles. As the cheers rose and Lily squeezed his hand with uncontained joy, Ethan realized his life was no longer defined by what he had lost, but by what he had found, a future rebuilt, a daughter's happiness secured, and a woman whose presence had turned a broken-down night in the rain into the beginning of everything he had ever dreamed.